Welcome back to another Python tutorial. More specifically, we are going to be revisiting a popular topic on this channel related to the Win32com library. And then more specifically, we are now going to explore using that library in tandem with an Adobe application, more specifically the Adobe Illustrator application. So Win32com does give us the capability to automate Adobe Illustrator using Python. And so this is really nice because I use this all the time to help create thumbnails for my videos. And so you can see right here that this is a thumbnail that I've used in a previous video, and I have basically automated the entire process of creating thumbnails by having a Python script that will go to my master Excel file, as you would call it, and it loads information that I already have typed out. It will create the thumbnail for me. It will make sure the fonts are correct, the colors are correct, and it will export that thumbnail as a PNG file that I specify to the location that is specified in the script. So it's really a nice tool, and it's really nice if you use Adobe Illustrator a lot to know the different ways that you can automate your interactions with it using Python. Now, I'm looking into potentially doing other Adobe applications like Premiere and Audition. So supposedly there are ways to automate different aspects of those applications as well. So I'm starting to do the research process of that. And if I feel comfortable that we can actually do something with it, and if I find that there's actually some useful features that other people could leverage, I would probably do a series on that. But that is very early on in the process. I have just barely started scratching the surface as to what is out there, what can be used, and seeing if it might require taking an existing library and maybe modifying it to suit my specific needs, and then sharing my journey along that process. So pretty interesting stuff in terms of what to expect with the Adobe application suite. So what we're going to do is, as you can tell right now in front of you, there is a thumbnail. I'm going to show you just very, very basic operations. This is more serving as our introduction video to start exploring what is Adobe Illustrator and how do we interact with it using Win32com by just doing a very basic operation to kind of get us familiar with different objects and how they relate to each other. But the ultimate goal is to take this thumbnail and export it as a PNG. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go into Visual Studio Code. If you haven't already, you're going to want to make sure to create a new Python file. So if you go up to File and then you do New File, it will create one here for you. You want to make sure that you have your syntax highlighting on. So for example, I want to do Python. And then the other thing is you do want to make sure that you save this file to some location, whether that be your desktop or wherever it might be. I currently have one open, and it's called Adobe_Illustrator. And this is the one that we're going to be using in order to modify our Adobe thumbnail. Then from here, there are requirements in order to use the Win32com library. It will come installed if you have Anaconda, I believe. But if you do not have Anaconda, then you need to install it. And to install it, it's actually not too bad. It's pip install pywin32, I believe. And if you actually go to the first link down here, you will see it will be pip install pywin32. So this is what we use to interact with the Win32 API to create and use COM objects, all from Python. So it's a very popular library. I've used it a lot, but all you would do is you would just copy this, and then you would go back into Visual Studio Code. From here, you open your terminal. On Windows, that's Control-J. Paste it in. Do your stuff. You can see it's already been satisfied for me, so it's not going to install it again. But if you would want to upgrade it, you could do that as well. So I'm going to close out my terminal, and then from here, I'm going to get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do import Win32com.client, And then I'm going to give it an alias name just so it's a little bit easier to work with. And I'm going to call this Win32. So I'm going to say my alias is import win32com.client as Win32. From here, every time we usually work with the Win32 library, we're getting some type of object, or we're going to create a new instance of an object. That object usually represents an application in most cases, at least when we've been doing it. So we've been working with Excel, with Word, with PowerPoint, and a few others. In this particular situation, we are going to be getting an active instance of an object. So this object is already running in the background. So in this situation, I'm going to grab the active instance of Adobe Illustrator. Now you can tell I already have this open because if you go right here, this is my Adobe Illustrator application. So we're going to grab this application. We'll store it in a variable called Adobe App. To grab the active instance, you're going to go Win32, and then it's going to be get active, Win32com, get active object. And so you can see here, you can tell that it basically gets the active instance of an existing object using the program ID. This tends to be the more reader-friendly version of the application. So in this case, it would be Illustrator application. You could also technically use the CLS ID or the GUID, if that's what I remember it is correctly. Oh, the CLS ID. That is like a 24 long character unique code for each application. This is usually the more preferred route simply because it's the more human-friendly one. Most people, when they see this, they understand what it's going to be getting, what object it's going to be grabbing. With the CLS ID, it's not as intuitive. You have this long character and you have no idea what it means. Okay, and then from here, when we grab our Adobe application, it has a property that is part of it, and that property is called the active document. The active document represents that the document that you have currently open and you are interacting with. So you could see technically up here, I could have multiple documents, but right now I only have one. So my active document is the document that you see when you basically open up the Adobe Illustrator application. So if I want to, I can grab that active document. So grab the active document, and we'll call this Adobe document. This equals the Adobe app, and then we're going to take the active document property. And then I'm going to print out that Adobe document. So sometimes, depending on what we get, we'll get situations like this. Did I misspell something? Illustrator. Oh, I did misspell something. I forgot my R in my Illustrator. Oh no. So let's try again. So that was more successful, and we now have an instance of some type of object. Now, when we grab the active object, what happens behind the scenes is Win32com is either going to use late or early binding. But if we have never used early binding with this particular package or this particular COM object, then by default, it's always going to be using late binding. We have to explicitly define the early bound version of this. So we've seen this in previous videos, but it would basically be Win32com dot dispatch. It's generate cache and then ensure dispatch. So this is basically going to do something similar like we're doing up here, but it's going to generate Python code behind the scenes that will then allow us to use early binding. And that will at least give Python an idea of what properties and methods are part of that particular object. We discussed that in a video a long time ago that discusses the difference between early and late binding inside of Win32com. I'll have a link down below to that video, but if you want to go into more details about that topic, I would recommend going to that video just because I spend like a full 20-25 minutes discussing it and showing the differences. But from here, we have our active document, and then our active document is made up of something called layers. And so layers are basically, if you look at it from here, it's the different levels about it, right? So it's kind of like almost like groups in a sense, but there's also grouped items and stuff like that. So you can have multiple layers in part of your particular, I guess, artboard. So technically this is representative of our artboard, and that can have multiple layers to it. Now I have a very simple artboard, so I only have one layer inside of it. And that layer is represented by something called the thumbnail video. So I actually gave this layer a name. And if you see, I can edit that name as well. This will come in handy when it comes to selecting layers by their key or their index. Additionally, I did want to share that I do have some documentation I will share with everyone on the channel. This is a nice little PDF guide that shows the different properties and methods for each of the objects in the Illustrator object model. But if you go down to page 56, they have a nice little, I guess, hierarchy that shows you the relationship between all the different objects. But you can see here at our highest level, we have our application object. And then our application is made up of a document. And then our document is made up of a layer and then a group item. And it's kind of showing that this can go in like this little circle aspect. So you can have different layers inside of a layer. You can have different group items inside of a group item. So you can kind of go down different layers. And then additionally, each one of these can have different components to it as well, right? So you can have a group item or a document, and each one of these has a page item, a graph item, mesh item, path item, and they just represent different objects inside of the Illustrator object model. And they represent different things, right? So this could be just different effects. This could be different kind of design schemes or whatever it might be. One we're going to be working with specifically is a text frame. So something that contains text. We also have compound path items and then path items. Additionally, we have some kind of more stylistic objects. So these would be things like gradient designs, a brush, paragraph styles, character style. I haven't worked with a data set before, but there's that, patterns, symbols, view, spot, and graphic style. So this is at least the high level overview of what that object model looks like and just some of the different objects that are related to the other main objects. But at this point, all we've done is we've grabbed our application, we grabbed our document, and now we're on a layer object. So if I want to grab a specific layer, how do I do that? Well, what we can do is we can use the name of that layer to select it. So grab a specific layer inside of my document. I kind of like to think of it like as your artboard. So I don't know, I guess the active document is fine, but the way I've kind of thought about it is like this is considered your artboard in a sense, if that's the way you want to think about it. I don't know if that's the best way, but it is what it is. I'll create a new variable. I'll call it thumbnail layer. That equals my Adobe document. And then that has a layers properties collection, right? So kind of going back to Excel, Adobe has similar, I guess, objects to it, right? So they have collections as well. And it follows a very similar naming convention that you would see with Excel and PowerPoint. So if you see layers, that is a collection of different layer objects, so individual layer objects. If I want to grab a specific layer from that collection, I can either use the index of it or something that's a little bit more reliable is the actual name of that layer, because that name should be unique to it. And then from here, I could do things like print the thumbnail layer dot name. And you can see that it did just that. So it printed out that thumbnail layer. So now we have currently our thumbnail layer selected, or at least referenced inside of our script. Inside of our thumbnail layer, we have different objects that we can also grab. In this situation, there is something called text frames. The text frames represent basically these little guys right here. So these are different text frames that contain actual text inside of it. Now, there's some other things here. So this is considered like a path item. So this actual black square, that's considered a path item, and some other stuff too. This is actually considered a group of items. So this is different objects inside of it. And we'll get to there once we get there. I think that's for a later video because that's a little bit more complex. But if I want to grab just those text frames or specific text frames, let's grab that as well. So grab the video title and video series text frame. In this situation, I'm going to create a new variable called video title frame. I'm going to take that thumbnail layer. This has a text frames collection that contains multiple text frame objects, right? So collection, multiple of that same object. And similar to our layers collection, we can use the name of that particular text frame that we want to select. So in this case, I'm going to select my video title frame. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my video series frame. Thumbnail layer, text frames. And then with this one, it's going to be video series frame, just like that. I'll put the S right there. And then what I'll do is I'll print out my video title frame, and then I will put the name as well, just to make sure that everything seems to be working. Now, with this particular library, Win32com, it can be a little bit challenging as to what properties and methods each object has. So unfortunately, that is just one of those things you're going to have to read the documentation. But I did grab the different documentation out there. I will be providing it for you so you don't have to go searching for it, because this one's actually a little bit hidden. But this will actually show you the different things that you can do when it comes to working with particular ones. So say, for example, I want to work with a text frame. You can see right here that this is just giving you some different examples. I'm trying to look through the documentation so that way you can see it, but you can see you can add them. You can change the location of it, all sorts of different stuff. And we will go into examples of that down the road, but obviously that's when we want to start doing some more specific things. But you can see right here, it does give you every object and some of the things that you can do with it. I will say one thing that is not intuitive was actually changing the colors sometimes. So I will be showing that at some point as well. But you can see these are the different properties about this particular object. So position, for example, maybe you want to see the position, right? You can see here, this is the position of our thumbnail. I mean, not our thumbnail, of our video series. So I'm expecting all you artistic people out there who use this a lot, chime in and let us know, because I'll be honest, I'm not a crazy master of Adobe Illustrator, but I've used it enough at this point to be a little bit dangerous with it, but nothing too crazy. Okay, so that's grabbing those different text frames. Let's also grab our particular, our little background, right? So our little thumbnail background, because this is technically a different item. So if I want to grab that one's actually considered something called a path item. And so I guess with the path item, it's kind of more like a shape if you want to think about it. But what we'll do here is we'll say thumbnail, grab the background, and we'll do thumbnail background equals thumbnail layer, and then it's going to be path items. And just like the previous one, it's going to be thumbnail background. And then also with this one, I want to give a more meaningful name than background, not with a D at the end. So this would grab that one. And again, if I want to just make sure I'm doing everything and I'm not going insane, I want to make sure that it's printing it out and that everything's working up until this point. Now, something I'll show you too is you can actually grab the text from each of these text frames. So that's actually not too bad as well. So if I want to print the text inside the video series one, that's pretty straightforward to do. I'll take my video series frame. There is a text range property inside of that particular text frame that represents the range of text. And that also has a contents property. And this prints the contents of that particular text frame. And you can see right here, it looks pretty good right now. Now, if I wanted to change it, for example, so maybe I want to change it to change the text for the series, I could say something like video series frame text range dot contents equals sigma coding. Oh, and look at that. it got changed. And one also neat thing here is you can go backwards and forwards. So kind of like with PowerPoint, you actually can go undo and redo with this particular object. With Excel, not so much, but with Adobe, it is possible to do that. So I'm going to comment out this line just so that way I don't run it again and it changes at all. What we're going to do next is we are going to define something called a color object. So we are going to create a new color, right? So this is something in Excel, for example, that's pretty easy to do. It's really easy to create a new color. In Adobe, we have to do an extra step, which is we actually have to create a object that represents that color. So I'm going to create the background color. And then for this one, again, a little bit different. You're going to basically instantiate a new instance of an Illustrator.RGB color object. Now, in that specific PDF file I showed you, there is a section that they lay out the different objects that you have to explicitly create inside of your script. There are a few, but not all of them. However, for a color, you do have to create a new object in order to kind of create a color, if that's how you want to think about it. So I'm going to say background color, and then I'm going to define the different properties about it. In this case, I'm going to define the black version of it. And so I'm going to say background color dot red and then dot green is equals 24. And then background color blue equals 24. So again, that's really all you do once you've defined it like this. You can use it anywhere in your script. It's not like we have to use it right away. It's fine. So now you have it there to use in different things. The only reason I'm creating this is because I want to export my thumbnail. And to export it, I'm going to define the export options. So that's kind of like going here and then going to File, Export, and then Export As. And you can do different things here. You can say PNG and stuff like that. You can also do export. If I do this, I can select everything and I can say export selection. And you can do different things with it. You can say, hey, I want to make it a PNG. I want to do XYZ. I can also like grab it specific and I can say, okay, I want to do transparent. I want to do background color black, all sorts of different things that you can do with it. It's just dependent on what you're trying to do. Now we'll walk through setting those options using Win32Com. So I'm going to define the export PNG 24 options. This is similar to what we did up above with a color. We have to create a new instance of an object. So PNG export options, Win32Com dispatch, and then it's going to be Illustrator. I don't know why my voice is getting like that. Export options, PNG 24. If you're like me, this is always a chance for you to misspell something. So be careful when you do this because it will error out if you spell it incorrectly. It's not smart. It's not going to go, hey, you're just one letter off. So there's different properties that you can set about it. So one is anti-aliasing or Alice. I don't know how to pronounce it, but aliasing. I don't know. I'll set that to true. That kind of makes it a little bit more crisp. That's the way I've always thought about it. PNG export options, transparency. I do want it to be transparent for PNG purposes. And then next, I want it to have a PNG export options. The matte color is kind of like the background color in a sense. Well, it's not really the background color. It's kind of like just the filling in portions of it. It's going to be the black, the background color that we defined up above. So the one that represents our black background. It's basically this black that you see right here. It's not a full black. It's kind of like a softer black. And then this is what we're saying is going to be that matte color. So again, if I went here and I was to export it, you'll see there's an option. There's a black one, PNG 8. If I don't want transparent, I could do that as well too. So it's kind of interesting as well, because when you technically select transparent, then what happens is this kind of goes out from the back. So it's interesting how it all kind of changes on you depending on if you have transparent or not. You have PNG, and you have transparent, all sorts of different stuff, interlaced. So different things you can do with it. So I guess technically, in a sense, if I put this on, I really don't need to put this because this isn't going to matter. But I'll just turn this one off for a second, and then let's see what we get. Then from here, we can export the document. So let's now actually export the document, or I guess the artboard. We'll say export the artboard. I'm going to say Adobe document. There is an export method, and then we need to provide a couple different things. The first is going to be the export file. This represents the raw file path. Now I can make my life a little bit easier, and I'll copy this. And then I'll give it a name like my sample artboard. You don't need to put an extension in here. That's actually one of the nice things about it. By specifying your export options, it will put the correct extension for you. Then there's export formats, and then there's 5. I think this is PNG, if I remember correctly. And then I'm going to put the options. Let's take a look at that really quickly because I can't remember what that is off the top of my head, and it's going to bother me. Here we go. E, A, B, C, D. Oh, these are the properties. That's why. I'm like, I don't see it. Export. Here we go. Export type. So the export type must be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe it's got to be the enumeration. I would say it couldn't be SVG, could it? I'll see what happens when I put it on 4. I'm not well, no, I guess it could be 5 if I start from 1. I guess it could be 5. Where is it again? I just lost it. Air compression quality. Oh, there's so much. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's probably doing the PNG 8, if I had to guess. Let's see what happens. Did I misspell it? I misspelled it. I guarantee you I misspelled it. Oh, Lordy Lord. I knew it. I always misspell this stuff. You people are supposed to help me with this. I'm just kidding. I don't do live stream, so it's expected. Okay, and then you can see here's my sample artboard. And there we can see it got exported beautifully. It looks all nice and pretty. But you can see too that this is also, one of the nice little tricks that you can do with it. So let's change and turn that off. Something that's nice too is it just basically overwrote the old one. So anytime you don't change the file name, it does exactly what you think it's going to do, which is it's just going to overwrite it. So that's also a nice little feature I like. I don't have to worry about it erroring out. That's a good and a bad though. I'll be honest. Sometimes that's a good, sometimes that's a bad, but you can see that a lot of things that it might have errored out on the application, or it might not allow you to set on the application. Technically, we're allowed to set it, which is interesting, to put it nicely. So you can see right here that it would change it a little bit. Let's change this to 4. So it looks like this one, it's a little bit less angry, or it's a little bit more angry about it. Let's see what happens when I put this. Again, I'm going to think it has something to do with the enumeration aspect of it. So different things that you kind of just have to play around when it comes to working with it. But I would say this is kind of our introduction to our wonderful little topic. So now you can kind of see what it looks like to work with our particular Adobe Illustrator application from Python and setting up some of that stuff to where we can now interact with it using Python. That's really nice. This I've used tremendously because it just helps automate different aspects of maintaining my channels, and I can just, write a few lines of code and then export and create all my different thumbnails and then have them saved to the right location. So when I start editing videos, it's really quick. That's why I started exploring the Adobe Premiere Python package, because ideally I want to automate different aspects of my video editing as well. So that way, just little, I would say, tedious things like making sure the audio is synchronized, putting the right audio setting on it, making sure I have my effect where it needs to be. Being able to do that in an automated fashion just saves me a lot of time, and then again allows me to focus on what I like doing, which is writing the code, not editing the videos. I love editing, but at the same time, I'm not good at it, and I rather just have certain things automated regarding it. So I applaud all of you who are expert video editors, because I wish I had that talent. I don't. I wasn't given that artistic capability, but maybe one day I will be at a point where I will have somewhat, professional looking videos that are all fancy. But as a final note, if you have any questions about using Adobe Illustrator, feel free to put those comments down below. Again, if you have any suggestions maybe for upcoming videos regarding Adobe Illustrator, I'm happy to hear your suggestions as well. Otherwise, I think in our next video, we will continue exploring working with different objects and start doing some more formatting options, like maybe taking text and making it a certain style or certain color or whatever you want to do with it, and just playing around more with particular objects and seeing what we can do with them. So this, again, was just more serving as a very basic introduction, but now let's start exploring some specific objects and seeing what we can really do with them. So thank you again for watching, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful day.